Ozzy Osbourne died. A grainy cell phone video leaked that broke the hearts of millions. But it wasn't what you'd expect from the Prince of Darkness's final moments. There was no stage, no screaming crowds, no metal anthems. Instead, the most powerful man in rock history was sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor, patiently teaching a 7-year-old boy how to hold a guitar pick. That little boy was his grandson, Leo. And this simple moment represented something far more complicated and heartbreaking than anyone realized. See, what the world didn't know is that Ozzy hadn't seen Leo in over 2 years. Not because of his illness, not because of touring schedules, but because of a family war so bitter that it had torn the Osbourne clan apart at the worst possible time. While Ozzy was fighting the battle of his life against his deteriorating health, he was simultaneously fighting another battle, one to see his own grandchild. The estrangement started in late 2022 when Ozzy's daughter Kelly got into a devastating fight with Sharon over Leo's upbringing. Kelly believed Sharon was trying to control every aspect of her son's life, turning family gatherings into publicity opportunities and treating Leo more like a prop than a grandchild. The argument got so heated that Kelly stormed out of a family Christmas dinner and made a declaration that shattered Ozzy's world. "If you can't respect my boundaries as a mother, then you won't see my son." For a man who'd survived every excess imaginable, who'd conquered addiction, who'd faced down death multiple times, nothing prepared Ozzy for the agony of being cut off from his grandson. Sharon was caught in the middle, forced to choose between supporting her daughter's parenting decisions and watching her dying husband's heart break a little more each day. But here's what makes this story absolutely devastating. Ozzy never stopped trying. While the world saw him getting frailer, what they didn't see were the dozens of letters he wrote to Kelly, begging for just 5 minutes with Leo. Letters where the man who'd screamed, "Crazy Train," 1,000 times wrote things like, "I just want to teach him one song before I go. Just one song so he remembers his grandfather's voice." Kelly held firm for 26 months. 26 months where a dying grandfather counted every single day he was missing with his grandchild. 26 months where Leo asked his mother why Grandpa Ozzy didn't love him anymore, breaking Kelly's heart with an innocence that eventually broke her resolve. The breakthrough came in January 2024, when Ozzy's doctor delivered the news everyone had been dreading. Weeks, not months. That phone call from Sharon to Kelly lasted 4 hours, and by the end of it, both women were sobbing as they realized that pride was about to rob a little boy of his last chance to know his grandfather. When Kelly finally brought Leo to see Ozzy, the reunion nearly destroyed everyone who witnessed it. Leo ran straight to his grandfather, who was sitting in his favorite chair, looking frailer than anyone had ever seen him. But the moment that little boy climbed into his lap, something magical happened. Ozzy's face lit up with more energy than he'd shown in months. "I missed you so much, Grandpa," Leo whispered, and Ozzy started crying right there, not caring who saw him. This was the man who'd built a career on being tough, on being shocking, completely melting in the arms of a 7-year-old who just wanted his grandfather back. What happened next changed everything. Instead of the awkward, tentative reunion everyone expected, it was like no time had passed at all. Within minutes, Leo was asking Ozzy to play guitar, and Ozzy, despite barely having the strength to hold the instrument, was teaching his grandson the opening chords to Paranoid. That leaked video captured just 40 seconds of what became a 72-hour marathon of making up for lost time. But it also captured something else. The moment a dying legend remembered what he was actually living for. Not the fame, not the legacy, not the millions of fans around the world. Just one little boy who thought his grandpa was the coolest person who ever lived. And Ozzy was determined to give Leo enough memories to last a lifetime, even if he only had days to create them. Here's what nobody expected when Ozzy got that devastating diagnosis. Instead of accepting his fate, he became a man possessed with one final mission. The doctors had given him maybe a week, possibly less. Most people would spend that time saying goodbyes, getting affairs in order, or simply resting. But Ozzy Osbourne wasn't most people, and he had 72 hours to become the grandfather he'd never had the chance to be. What happened next sounds impossible, but Sharon confirmed every single detail. Despite barely being able to walk without assistance, Ozzy started making phone calls, not to lawyers or managers or fellow musicians, to contractors. Within 6 hours of Leo's reunion visit, Ozzy's backyard was crawling with construction crews working around the clock on the most important project of his life. He was building a playground, but not just any playground, a custom wonderland designed specifically for one little boy who loved music just as much as his grandfather did. A treehouse with built-in speakers, a sandbox shaped like a guitar, and most incredibly, a miniature recording studio, complete with child-sized equipment and soundproofing, where a 7-year-old could make all the noise he wanted without disturbing anyone. The family thought Ozzy had completely lost it. Here was a dying man spending his last burst of energy on swings and slides instead of preparing for the inevitable. Sharon tried to convince him to slow down, to save his strength. Kelly worried he was setting unrealistic expectations for Leo, creating something magical that would only make the loss harder when it came. "He's in denial," Kelly confided to her brothers. "Dad thinks if he builds Leo the perfect playground, somehow time will stop and he won't have to leave." But they were all wrong about what Ozzy was really doing. This wasn't denial. This was the most clear-headed, purposeful thing Ozzy had done in years. He knew exactly how little time he had left, and he was determined to compress a lifetime of grandfatherly love into every minute of it. The playground took 36 hours to complete. 36 hours where Ozzy supervised every detail despite being so weak he had to direct operations from a wheelchair. He insisted on testing every piece of equipment himself, even though climbing a slide nearly killed him. "If it's not safe for me, it's not safe for Leo," he kept saying, as if somehow his approval could protect his grandson from everything dangerous in the world. But here's where the story gets truly heartbreaking. Hidden cameras that the family had installed to monitor Ozzy's condition captured moments that nobody was supposed to see. Moments that revealed the depth of love between a grandfather and grandson who barely knew each other but were somehow perfectly connected. There was the moment when Ozzy fell asleep in the middle of telling Leo a story about his touring days, and Leo carefully covered him with a blanket, whispering, "Sweet dreams, Grandpa," in the exact same tone Ozzy had used to say goodnight to him. The moment when Leo found Ozzy crying while looking at old photo albums, and without saying a word, just climbed into his lap and started humming "Crazy Train" until Ozzy smiled. Most incredibly, there was the moment when Leo asked Ozzy why everyone seemed so sad lately, and instead of lying or changing the subject, Ozzy told him the truth in the gentlest way possible. "Sometimes, Leo, people get very sick and their bodies get too tired to keep going, but love never gets tired. Love lives forever." Leo thought about this for a long minute, then asked the question that destroyed everyone who heard it. "Will you love me forever, Grandpa, even when your body gets too tired?" Ozzy's answer became the theme of everything that followed. "Forever and always, little man, forever and always." What nobody expected was how much Leo was teaching Ozzy during these precious hours. This little boy, innocent and pure and completely unaware that he was spending time with a living legend, treated his grandfather like the most important person in the world. Not because of his fame or his music or his legacy, but simply because he was Grandpa Ozzy who built him a playground and taught him guitar chords. For the first time in his 74 years, Ozzy understood what unconditional love actually felt like. Not the conditional love of fans who loved him for what he could do, but the pure love of a child who loved him simply for being himself. Leo didn't care about Ozzy's past mistakes, his struggles with addiction, his controversial career. All Leo cared about was that his grandpa listened to his stories, laughed at his jokes, and made him feel like the most special kid in the world. The tragic irony wasn't lost on anyone watching. Ozzy had spent decades trying to be the perfect rock star, the perfect showman, the perfect rebel. But in his final days, he was learning how to be perfect at the only thing that really mattered, being a grandfather who made a little boy feel infinitely loved. Time was running out, but for these 72 hours, it felt like maybe, just maybe, love could make time stand still. On Ozzy's final day with enough strength to stand, something magical happened in that tiny recording studio he'd built for Leo. What started as a grandfather teaching his grandson a simple song turned into 40 minutes of pure musical perfection that nobody was prepared for, least of all the family members who walked in on it. It began innocently enough. Leo had been playing with the child-sized guitar Ozzy had bought him, trying to remember the chords to Paranoid they'd practiced the day before. His little fingers couldn't quite reach all the frets, and he was getting frustrated, the way kids do when something doesn't work the way they want it to. "It's okay, buddy," Ozzy said, settling into the chair next to Leo's miniature recording booth. Let's try something different, something just for us. That's when Ozzy started humming a melody that nobody had ever heard before. Not a Black Sabbath song, not a solo hit, nothing from his 50-year catalog. This was something completely new, something that seemed to flow out of him like he'd been saving it his whole life for exactly this moment. Leo's eyes lit up the way only a child's can when they hear something that speaks directly to their soul. Without any prompting, he started humming along, his pure, untrained voice finding harmonies that professional musicians would have struggled to discover. It was like watching two musical souls recognize each other across generations. "What's that song, Grandpa?" Leo asked, and Ozzy's answer shocked everyone who heard it later. "I don't know yet, little man. Why don't we figure it out together?" For the next 40 minutes, grandfather and grandson created something that can only be described as miraculous. Ozzy's voice, which had been weak and raspy for months, suddenly found strength it hadn't possessed in years. Not the screaming power of his metal days, but something even more beautiful, the gentle strength of pure love channeled through music. Leo, meanwhile, was fearless in the way only children can be. He suggested melodies, made up lyrics on the spot, and sang with the kind of joy that reminded everyone why they'd fallen in love with music in the first place. When Ozzy sang "Little Hands, Big Dreams, Everything's Possible," Leo immediately responded with "Big Heart, Little Me, Flying High with Grandpa Z." The song they created was called "Forever and Always," the promise Ozzy had made to Leo about their love. But it wasn't just a grandfather singing to his grandson. It was two souls having a musical conversation about love, family, dreams, and the magic that happens when people understand each other completely. That's when Sharon walked in, expecting to find Ozzy exhausted and Leo getting restless. Instead, she discovered both of them crying and laughing simultaneously as they listened to their recording, completely lost in the joy of what they'd created together. "Mom, listen," Leo called out, his face glowing with pride. "Grandpa and I made a song, our very own song that nobody else in the whole world has." Sharon later described that moment as watching her dying husband become more alive than he'd been in months. The creative energy that had always driven Ozzy was flowing through him one last time, but instead of channeling it into darkness or rebellion, he was pouring it into pure love. But here's where the story becomes even more incredible. The family's initial reaction was to keep this recording private forever. It was too personal, too precious, too heartbreaking to share with a world that had always demanded pieces of Ozzy's soul. "This isn't for anyone else," Kelly insisted. "This is ours. This is Leo's inheritance from his grandfather, something that belongs just to him." The debate raged for hours while Ozzy slept. Should they honor his legacy by sharing this final musical gift with his fans? Or should they protect Leo by keeping this innocent moment away from public scrutiny? The person who finally convinced them to share it was the most unexpected voice of all, Leo himself. "But Grandpa always shares his music," Leo said when the family tried to explain why this song might need to stay secret. "He told me that music is supposed to make people happy. Won't this make people happy too?" Out of the mouths of babes came the wisdom that settled the debate. Ozzy had spent his entire career sharing his music with the world, even when it was dark, even when it was controversial, even when it made him vulnerable. How could his family deny the world one final gift, especially one that showed the pure love that had always been at the heart of everything he'd done? The recording of "Forever and Always" became more than just a grandfather's final song with his grandson. It became proof that love creates the most beautiful music of all. Ozzy passed away, something extraordinary happened that nobody saw coming. Leo, now 8 years old, did something that proved he'd inherited more than just his grandfather's musical talent. He'd inherited his superpower for bringing broken people together through pure, unconditional love. It started at Ozzy's public memorial service, where thousands of fans had gathered to pay their respects. Leo was supposed to stay backstage with the family, protected from the crowds and media attention. But when the ceremony began and he heard people crying, this little boy made a decision that changed everything. He walked out onto that massive stage, took the microphone, and said 7 words that silenced thousands of people. "My grandpa wants everyone to be happy." Then, without any accompaniment, without any preparation, Leo started singing "Forever and Always," the song he and Ozzy had created together. His small voice carried across that massive venue, and something magical happened. Thousands of strangers, united in grief, started humming along to a melody they'd never heard before but somehow knew in their hearts. But Leo wasn't finished. When the song ended, he looked out at all those sad faces and said, "Grandpa told me that music is supposed to bring people together. So can everyone hug someone they don't know? Because that's what Grandpa would want." What happened next defied every expectation about human nature. Thousands of strangers, metalheads, families, celebrities, regular fans, started embracing each other like they'd been friends forever. Tears turned to laughter, grief transformed into celebration, and everyone in that space understood they were witnessing something sacred. The video of Leo's spontaneous performance went viral within hours, but not in the sensationalized way celebrity content usually spreads. This was different. People weren't sharing it for shock value or drama. They were sharing it because it reminded them of what they'd forgotten about love, family, and the things that actually matter. More incredibly, Leo's simple act of courage started healing relationships that had been broken for years. Estranged family members reached out to each other after watching this little boy demonstrate what unconditional love looked like. Parents called their children, siblings forgave old grudges, and friends reconnected after decades of silence. Sharon started receiving thousands of letters from people around the world, all saying variations of the same thing. "Your grandson reminded me what's important. I called my dad. I forgave my sister. I told my kids I loved them. Thank you." This is when the family realized that Leo hadn't just inherited Ozzy's musical gifts. He'd inherited his grandfather's ability to touch people's souls and inspire them to be better versions of themselves. But where Ozzy had done it through rebellion and raw honesty, Leo was doing it through pure innocence and love. The most beautiful part is that Leo has no idea he's carrying on his grandfather's legacy. To him, he's just being himself, a kid who misses his grandpa and wants everyone to be as happy as Ozzy made him feel during those precious 72 hours they had together. The family made a decision that Ozzy would have been proud of. Instead of protecting Leo from his grandfather's legacy, they're helping him embrace it in his own way. Not as a performer or celebrity, but as a reminder that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Forever and Always has now been streamed over 50 million times, but more importantly, it's become an anthem for families choosing love over everything else. Wedding first dances, funeral tributes, family reunions. Wherever people need to remember what really matters, they play the song a dying grandfather and his grandson created in 40 minutes of pure magic. Ozzy Osbourne's greatest hit wasn't Crazy Train or Shot in the Dark. It was teaching his grandson that love never dies. It just gets passed down to the next generation, growing stronger and more beautiful with each person it touches. Leo carries his grandfather's voice, his grandfather's heart, and his grandfather's mission to prove that broken people create the most beautiful things. And sometimes, the most beautiful thing they create is hope. These precious moments between Ozzy and Leo prove that our greatest legacy isn't fame or fortune. It's the love we leave behind in the hearts of those who matter most. If this story reminded you to cherish your family while you still can, share it with someone you love. Subscribe for more untold stories about the legends who taught us that love is the only thing that truly lasts forever.